Please join me in welcoming Admiral Joe Sestak.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. And I'd like to do something just a little different, if it's all right. I've been living in an Econo Lodge nearby for 77 of the last 90 days. I flew in June into Des Moines, right after my daughter, whose brain cancer had come back, and it finally went into remission, and she was in a safe harbor. I came here to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America. And it was about the time the corn had begun to sprout. And it was knee-high by the 4th of July. And last week we had a harvest moon. So I decided it was time, maybe I could tell you what I learned from Iowans in those 77 days I went around this state and came back at night to an Econo Lodge. We actually did about 235 events, including press engagements. Included in those were 13 parades, where I shook over 30,000 hands. Because I learned in Iowa, parades are pretty special, as a woman taught me, when I called her and said, "How many do you expect on the route?" And she said, "Well, we haven't had a parade for about 4 weeks, so we expect extra to be there." But we also passed out about 110,000 brochures into willing hands and underneath unwilling car windshield wipers. You might have even gotten one as you walked out of Hy-Vee. But over 17,000 miles I traveled throughout this state since late June. That's like going across America about 6 times. I learned the history about Iowa. Man, I saw where John Lewis was born, that great labor leader who put unions on the map in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. I saw where Radar Riley came from, that wonderful man in MASH who taught us the folly of war. And I met and learned that great characteristic through people of Iowans. Some call it Iowa nice. Nah, it's a lot more than that. There is a respect for others wherever I went around this state. It didn't matter whether there's a woman in a laundromat or whether there's a Republican in a parade. There was respect for others. And you may just call it Iowa nice, but it's a lot more than that. It's a lesson to the capital of this nation. But I saw it most particularly in the respect they had for veterans. When you go up to Waterloo and you see that wonderful museum to the 5 brothers, the 5 Sullivan brothers. Even in the Navy today, we have a ship named after those Iowans. Those 5 men who lost their life simultaneously in World War II on the same Navy ship, fighting nearby with my father in that Second World War. And then the Econo Lodge that I live on, that road named for Merle Hay, the very first American who was killed in World War I, in Iowa. And I saw it every day when I ran into a parade and went back and forth and shook hands, and they had a brochure with my picture on it. And as I ran up to them, inevitably, 1 out of 4 Iowans would look up and shake my hand or even stand up and say, "Thank you for your service." But then I met individual Iowans, one-on-one. The farmer I stood next to, as he pointed at his soybean crops and said, 1 out of 4 of those rows, I won't be able to plant next year. As a matter of fact, I might be out of business because our customer, China, no longer is buying from us. And then I met a precision agronomist, and after asking her what a precision agronomist was, and she explained, she also told me when she was done her job of making sure that those fields that are already so straight were precisely measured, that soon the tractors would be wireless and the workers on them would be gone. I met a Marine Corps veteran who worked in a factory after he got out of the Corps. He started at a certain wage in 1990, and when he left last year, anybody who entered that factory started just like he did at the same exact wage. I saw so many people who wanted to tell me about Medicaid in Iowa, to where it had been privatized and the service has plummeted, And yet this year, they were given an 8.6% raise, those private companies. And I saw through all those counties throughout beautiful Iowa how 2/3 of them are losing population as rural hospitals are disappearing. And who's going to set up a business where there isn't a nearby health provider? I listened and watched because it reminded me of how I'd walked 422 miles across Pennsylvania one time when I was running for the United States Senate. From the border of New Jersey with Pennsylvania all the way across to Ohio. I met coal miners who are losing their jobs, and many more will, but they don't have the money to learn a new skill. I met manufacturer workers who lost their job in Johnstown and also didn't have the money to lose the new skill as those small businesses went away. When I walked across the beautiful state also of Pennsylvania, that keystone state where I grew up, I got 2 calls. One was from a Republican, because I was in my flight jacket, and he recognized me as I was walking past his car dealership, and he said, and yelled out at me, "Hey, Admiral, I'm a Republican, but I love what you're doing." And then I got another call from the head Democratic senator, who raises the money for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and said, "Stop walking. Go back to your office and fundraise." But I kept walking and followed that Republican's advice. And it cost me, as my party leadership then put in from that committee more millions against me than they put in against Mitch McConnell. Too many have lost sight that it is always about people, above party, above self, above any special interest, no matter the cost. Come aboard with me into an aircraft carrier that I commanded in my battle group. As I launched off Afghanistan, 8 pilots, 7 of them had been in the first Gulf War. 1 of them had never been off the carrier deck, certainly not in combat before. She was 26 years old, and she was the one that disobeyed orders that night not to dive below 20,000 feet until we had time to check if she might or they might be endangered below. But 8 special forces had been ambushed. 4 had died immediately, and they said, "We have moments left. Someone strafe, we'll get out." Some asked permission. That young woman, that brand new pilot, felt she couldn't wait. She dove 3 times to strafe, and those 4 special forces who still lived picked up their 4 dead comrades and came home that night. That woman demonstrated exactly what this country is looking for and yearning for today. She was willing to be accountable to them, the troops, the people, above self, at the risk of her own career, never mind her life, no matter the cost to her. I honestly believe that we must beat Donald Trump above anything else. I can't wait. I can't wait to stand there and say, you know, Donald, we have something in common. We both went during the Vietnam era for our physicals, and I flunked it also. But I came back for a second time because I memorized the eye chart on the way out. I represented a nearly 2-to-1 Republican district. I was the second Democrat since the Civil War. I had an F from the NRA. I had 100% from NARAL pro-choice. I had 100% from National Organization of Women. I got reelected by 20 points, and I didn't spend a penny of the $3 million I raised on one single campaign ad. We somehow had learned to agree on certain things, and where we disagreed wasn't exactly Iowa niceness, but we respected one another because they knew ultimately they could trust me. I was always accountable to them, above party, self, or any special interest. That is our Hobson's choice. Not just to elect a president, but to heal this country's soul with someone who actually can, again, be able to get policies through and no longer have to have a president that can only do executive orders. Or how else will you meet the defining challenges of our time? Take climate change, the most catastrophic threat to mankind. Sure, we must here at home pass the ability to have a carbon fee dividend, and we must stop all fossil fuel subsidies to oil companies and others, those polluters, and move them to green energy. And we must stop all drilling offshore as well as the Arctic and in sacred Native American lands. But we also have to fix healthcare and get it through that Senate. Yes, we must move towards single payer. I get that, particularly with my own health insurance from the military. They gave us a $300,000 bill to try to save my daughter's life. And only 8% of kids have ever survived it, and she's done it twice. But how do we get there? I voted for the public option. How could you not? But in the military, you learn piss poor planning gives piss poor execution. So what you want to do is have a public option that moves us inexorably towards single payer, but it proves itself as a transition of choice as we get there. And you know what, in those rural counties, why don't you have a model like the VA, where it's been rated by the New England Journal of Medicine, a government-owned hospital is equal to or better than any other health provider, private or public. And then, yes, can we do student loans? In a heartbeat, there's a program out there that says in government, if everybody, we make it mandatory and make it at grandfathered and universal. You don't have to pay back any more than 10% of your student loan. We should lower it to 5%, and if you're lower income, forgive it after 20 years. Who do I want to focus on? The Clinton and the Trump supporter. 65% of Americans don't have a college degree. We are Democrats. Why aren't we focusing on that coal miner who have lost his job? The man who used to drive that tractor out there. And the farmer, when she loses her farm. Why don't we have a program I wrote about in 2015 in my book? It sold 6 copies. Where it's called Training for a Lifetime, like we do in the military. If the F-15 goes away, we send you to the largest community college in the nation, the Air Force Community College. And you learn the F-22. Technology is going to transfer so quickly, we have to have those 11 million Americans who no longer are in the labor participation rate back into the workforce by training them and retraining them over a lifetime. And finally, restore U.S. leadership to this world. So no longer do we have Democrats and Republicans alike who don't understand when they voted for that tragic misadventure in Iraq, the militaries can stop a problem, they can never fix a problem. And our president today had better understand with Iran. You better know how it's going to end before you begin. Thank you very much.
And I won't